All right, good morning, everyone. We're here for the Soil Health Specialist Training webinar number 3, where we're going to go over soil health assessment updates. For that, we're going to go over some brief housekeeping items. First, a reminder that the quarterly reporting is due at the end of June, or that reports will be due August 2nd, 2019. And you need to report to receive the stipend. The next time we'll be meeting is at Empire Farm Days for our 3rd workshop, which is the Eliminating, Reducing, or Modifying Tillage for Soil Health theme on August 6th and 7th at Empire Farm Days in Seneca Falls. We have a great reduced tillage, modifying tillage, and eliminating tillage agenda, as you can see in the topics, and also a great selection of presenters, including a tillage equipment field tour, tillage demo, cover crop demo, and 2 excellent farmer panels. Also, Aaron Ristow has wanted to have a save the date for McCulley Farms Soil Health Field Day, where there will be some cover crop mixture demonstration plots, and this will be at the end of August. So just save that date. Again, this is our contact information. And with that, I'm going to get started. So I'm going to give a short research update from the Cornell Soil Health Program on 2 recent research topics we've explored. This is one of my favorite images of the Hagerstown soil profile, not in New York, but just a wonderful image. First, we're going to discuss today our reanalysis of a great soil health data set from North Carolina. And second, we're going to briefly cover some of the work we're doing now to characterize soil health in New York. So first with North Carolina. In 2017, Roper et al. From North Carolina State University was comparing soil health tests, including Cash and Haney, across 3 long-term field experiments in North Carolina, located in 3 different physiographic provinces. There's Mountain Site, Piedmont Site, and the Coastal Plain Site. And basically, their title sums it up. They concluded that soil health indicators do not differentiate among agronomic management systems in North Carolina soils. But Harold Van Ness and other members of the team, after having researched soil health indicators for quite a while, having found that many of the soil health indicators that were selected because they're sensitive to management, that this didn't jive with their understanding, so they wanted to look at the data set. And one thing that they realized that was maybe limiting their analysis is they used the soil health scores instead of the raw values. I'm going to go into why that is. So our current cash scoring functions were not developed for North Carolina soils. The current scoring functions that are used were mostly developed from Northeastern and Midwestern soils. And one of the reasons it doesn't work for North Carolina soils is North Carolina soils are more weathered and have lower soil organic matter, and which follows that they also have lower active carbon, respiration, and ACE protein, as well as aggregate stability than these Northeast and Midwestern soils. So one thing that happens is the soil health scores have less power to discriminate against treatments at the low and high ends of the curve. So while for our current scoring functions, for medium textured soils, the mean is maybe 550 for active carbon, whereas the values that we were looking at in the North Carolina study range from about 100 to maybe 300. So even though that's quite a big difference in active carbon, those scores would only differ by 5 to 10 or something like that. So when we looked at the raw values, we found that similar to a lot of prior research, that active carbon and aggregate stability were consistently sensitive to these management treatments at these 3 sites. One thing that's interesting about this research is that some of our labile organic matter indicators were more sensitive to agricultural management than total soil organic matter. So you can see that soil organic matter was not significant. The treatments did not significantly affect soil organic matter, whereas they did affect protein respiration and active carbon. And as we know, aggregate stability is a great indicator and very sensitive to tillage practices, which also showed up at all 3 of these sites. So another really powerful thing about this data set is that we found a link between soil health and crop yield at one of these sites, the Piedmont site in Reidsville, North Carolina. And that's special because establishing positive relationships between soil health and crop yield is a difficult task, because soil health effects are often masked by non-soil factors such as pest, weed, pressures, erratic weather, and management effects. And people allegorically note that sometimes we see the effects of soil health on yield in bad weather years. So this was a nice finding. And this was specifically, this was a long-term 32-year tillage experiment in the Piedmont region in North Carolina on sandy loam soils in a corn soybean rotation. In our particular study, we grouped these tillage treatments into 3 categories. As you'll see, we grouped them into tillage treatments that involve the moldboard plow, tillage and treatments that involve chisel plowing, and 2 minimum till treatments. So you can see that 8 soil health indicators were positively correlated with mean corn yields at the site. And that indicators for labile organic matter, protein, active carbon, and respiration tended to rank higher than total organic matter, as we saw again, more sensitive indicators. And also protein is a good indicator of the soil organic nitrogen pool, so that by reducing tillage, we're saying here that you have higher protein levels, and maybe in some years that is helping your mean corn yield increase. So here's a zoom in on protein and active carbon, which are 2 important labile organic matter indicators. And we can see that these were positively correlated with corn yield. You can also note the error bars for yield are quite large for yield, but it's quite difficult to track an individual plot those soil health properties to yield in that exact plot. So I think really this is maybe the only way that you could find, one of the ways to find a relationship is looking at mean yield over time and its relationship to these soil health indicators. Interestingly, for soybean yield, active carbon and respiration were still good predictors of increases in mean soybean yield, but not protein, not as much protein, which would make sense because soybeans have the ability to fix their own nitrogen, so aren't as reliant on mineralization of soil organic nitrogen for uptake. Another project that we've been working on is characterizing soil health across New York State. As you can see, we have a pretty large data set of New York, samples that have been run through the Cornell Soil Health Lab. And we know we have a lot of wonderful information at the state and national level of how soils differ in their genesis across the landscape. But we also know that New York, that the diversity of agriculture in New York is so diverse. We have soils and pasture, annual grain land, dairy land, large scale commercial veg, and smaller scale diversified mixed vegetable production. And we know from our experience working in those different systems that those systems also have a large influence on the soil properties. So one thing we're excited about is kind of merging the knowledge we can get from soil survey and also from the effects of management systems and texture on these soil health properties, which are relatively new. We don't have so much data on some of these different, some active carbon, protein, respiration, aggregate stability. So one thing we're excited to do is be characterizing New York soil health by texture and agricultural operation. One thing I'm particularly excited about is now that our data set is growing and we've measured texture for almost 1,500 of these New York samples, that we can go beyond our coarse, medium, and fine texture categories and break out more texture categories. Another area, when people submit their samples to the Cornell Soil Health Lab, they also supply crop code information that we've grouped into 5 types of agricultural systems: dairy, pasture, mixed vegetable, large-scale processing vegetables, and annual grain crops, corn, grain, soybeans, and wheat. This is just a small picture of the size of our database. Standard means that they had texture run with them. So about 1,500 samples have had texture, and those are distributed pretty well between the coarse loam and silt loam categories. There are much less samples in the fine texture category, which basically means they have a clay content greater than 27%. And maybe a third of this data set came with reliable crop code information that was easy to move into these 5 categories I talked about before. So if you're familiar with the crop codes from submitting samples or submitting samples to Dairy One, this is a picture of the crop codes that were used to group into these 5 categories. One takeaway, we know this from a lot of prior research, but it's interesting, it's nice to see this in our data, or it's an important point to show. One, that texture has a very strong effect on on the health of soil and also the amount of organic matter that a soil can hold. So as soils increase their concentration of fine particles, silt and clay particles, they're able to, those particles have much more surface area than sand. So those fine particles are able to allow those soils to hold on to more organic matter. So as you go from the mean soil organic matter for coarse textured soil is about 2.5, where and it increases from coarse to loam to silt loam and to fine. And active carbon, ACE protein, and respiration also do this. So this indicates that we can do better than the coarse, medium, and fine scoring functions, and that this information is valuable for knowing, for being graded in the right soil texture. So what we're also doing is we're characterizing within a certain texture, because we know that texture has a very strong control, so we don't want to compare these systems across texture groups. So this is an example for loam textures. I've taken out samples that all a loam texture, and here we're seeing the effects of the cropping system, the 5 cropping systems on 5 important soil health indicators. And because it's hard to look at tables in the presentation, I've broken it up into some box plots. And basically, so this is soil organic matter across those 5 systems. One thing that pops right out is mixed vegetable farms has the largest range of % soil organic matter out of all these systems, largely because those are smaller operations and the operators are able to affect soil health at a much more influential scale. If it's an acre, you can apply so much compost. Pastures also have a higher mean soil organic matter than these other systems, which might include some have included some tillage in those systems. One thing that was interesting that popped out for active carbon is that despite lower soil organic matter, dairy soils seem to have similar active carbon to mixed veg and pasture soils. And also, it was interesting to see that the range for active carbon in annual cropland, for example, was much higher than soil organic matter. So similar to maybe from our North Carolina study, active carbon is going to be able to more quickly distinguish these management systems and total soil organic matter than our management practices. Pastures and mixed vegetable farms appear to have the highest soil protein compared to these other systems. Pastures have clearly higher soil respiration than the other systems. And one thing was really nice to see in all of these texture categories is that the pasture soils always had really high wet aggregate stability compared to the other systems. We know that systems that are undisturbed, that have constant intact roots and arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi constantly pumping carbon into the soil, feeding organisms and helping stabilize aggregates, are the systems that are going to be producing high aggregate stability. So it's nice to be able to see that in the data. One thing that we've been excited about with adding this cropping system data is that we can start to define aspirational soil health goals for these different management systems. So if you're a dairy versus annual grain grower compared to a commercial grain grower or pasture grower, your aspirational soil health goals will be different because the tools you have that you're able to use are very different. So we want to be scoring, kind of grading each type of operation with against other farms within that type of operation. So you're maybe getting more realistic goals and soil health scores for your operation. This is some more indicators that we're showing. So here, we define these aspirational soil health goals by targeting the 75th percentile, which basically is the point where 75% of the data is below that point. So having in our data set, having 3.7 organic matter on a loam texture is really good, is a pretty good goal. Some take-home messages are that these CAS scoring functions were not developed for southeastern soils for North Carolina. The scoring functions are only as good as the data they were created from. And as they mention in their paper, actually, that we need more soil health data from different regions to be developing appropriate scoring functions that correspond to inherent soil types and also the effects of management on those soil types. With our reanalysis, we showed that our soil health indicators were sensitive to these long-term treatments, but interestingly, our more sensitive indicators, active carbon, protein respiration, aggregate stability, were sensitive to long-term tillage practices, but not total soil organic matter. So total soil organic matter is not as sensitive to management practices as some of those other ones. Another nice thing about that North Carolina data set, we saw a correlation between biological indicators related to labile carbon and nitrogen, active carbon, respiration, protein, were best correlated with crop yield. We're undergoing this New York Soil Health Characterization project by soil type, texture, and crop code. And we've known about the strong effects of texture on soil health, and we're seeing in our data set the strong effects of different management systems on soil health. So combining that information seems really important to us. We are almost complete with a very detailed report characterizing these 1,500 samples from New York by soil type, texture, and crop code. So that'll be available soon through many different avenues. Takeaway we've known from before, finer textured soils store more organic matter, and also some of those other biological organic matter indicators than coarser textured soils. And then differences in soil health among management systems within the same texture group suggest that that we should have different aspirational goals or scoring depending on the system. So with that.
So, well, we would like to go around the room and just check in with everyone and see how things are going. I would also like to, it would be interesting to get some feedback on some of these ideas. So, you know, like one of the concepts is having scoring functions that are specific to certain crop codes, like Joseph was just saying, if we had enough database, a large enough data set that could happen. That's kind of related to the North Carolina data, because, you know, their argument was that, well, there's just these scoring functions don't work for the Southeast. Well, you know, Harold or the lab never said that they did. In fact, the argument is that's why we need more research, more funding, not for the lab itself, but just in general to develop scoring functions to get the database, because the framework, I believe, is solid in terms of using these scoring functions to interpret values. But of course, you have to have the data set to be able to do that. And so it is exciting to look how the lab is moving into doing that for more specific cropping systems. But again, getting that database robust enough to make it actually, informative is important. So it would be interesting to hear what some folks think, but also just want to check in and see how people are doing. So we are going to go around the room, and I can see who's on here, but I think, so we do have a lot of people. So I'm just going to go in alphabetical order to keep track. So I think that means Lori is first, because I don't think Debbie's on the phone today. I think she's traveling. So Lori, are you unmuted? And
Yes. Good morning.
oh, there you are. Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Yeah. What have you been up to this spring so far?
Scouting, of course, trying to dodge the raindrops and trying to figure out new crops if needed for each farm to have enough feed for their dairy is what our big challenge has been this spring.
Yeah, that's a big concern then, is feeling like there'll be enough feed at the end of the season because there's not enough acres planted now.
Exactly.
Because of the rain?
Yep.
Yeah, interesting.
It is. And then even stuff that is planted, just having trouble either coming up or rotting, not having enough nitrogen is, of course, with the leaching and all, has been an issue too.
Yeah, I mean, in Ithaca right now, as we're doing this, it's pouring.
Yeah.
So it's just another wet day. It's just unbelievable.
It is. Guess we should have converted to rice paddies this year, huh?
Yeah, that would have been more productive, I think.
Yeah. Yep. So, yep.
All right. So did you have any other thoughts or any questions you wanted to share?
Actually, all the information that was given was quite new for me. So just digesting and processing that, I'm still working with. And I like the idea and the concept that Joseph was telling us about. And I thought it was interesting that the North Carolina soils were a bit different than ours, which makes sense.
Yeah. Yep. Great. Well, thanks, Lori. So I'm going down the list. Yeah, I don't think that Lynn is on the phone. So I'm just going to ask Lynn, are you out there? Yep, that's okay. And I don't think I see Brian on here today. So I'll just ask Brian Borman. Sorry, there is the other Brian, but Brian Borman, are you on? Yep, and I think that I don't see Anne Marie. This is why we record them, but it is good to have people on for participation. But I don't see Anne Marie. It is a busy time of the year. And that is why this is the last webinar now until probably next February, because we will be having the workshop in 6 weeks or so. And anyway, we're having the workshop coming up, and then people are busy this time of year. So we recognize that. So it's understandable. But Dan, I think Dan's on. Are you there?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sounds good. How are you doing, Dan?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for the conference call this morning. A lot of the information Joseph was sharing was really interesting. Are we going to be getting links to these data sets just so we can dive in a little bit further into them, just to get a little bit more understanding of them? It just kind of goes through quick.
Yeah, I can, we had a What's Cropping Up article about the North Carolina reanalysis, which I was kind of summarizing. And this New York, we're probably going to have another extension article about the New York data set. And also, I think the first thing that we're going to put out is kind of the meaty report with probably way too many tables and all sorts of stuff for all this New York data set. And then from that, we're going to be building smaller, more digestible pieces that can be more useful, maybe as fact sheets and things like that. So I can
Cool.
send it there in the links and.
Yeah, that's what we'll do is, yeah, so there is the what's cropping up article that we'll post with, we can put this PowerPoint up. Obviously it was recorded, and then there's the what's cropping up article for now, but I think eventually you guys are going, the lab, right, is going to actually publish this.
Yeah, no, the lab,
set. Yeah.
We're first going to do kind of publish a data report, but I think we're going to, publish it, get it out there through all different sorts of avenues.
I forgot one of the challenges when you look at the data, well, even Joe's slides, there's the error bars are really large on there, which makes doing the statistics harder. But those, because there was like 30 years of data, and as you probably know, it's the most important factor on affecting yield is the weather. And so those error bars represent really the noise from just different years of weather, and other factors that Joseph mentioned, the weed pressure, pest pressure, that sort of thing. So I that, just keep that in mind when you're looking at, you'll look at it and think, well, geez, there's a huge error here, but that's overlapping. But so anyway, so I'm sure that Harold will figure out how to get around that, but that is one of the challenges for that. And in general, I don't think it's good to go around and say that soil health equals better yields. It's just too, there's just too many factors. It's just like saying, a healthy person is not going to die young or something. There's just so many other factors that are involved, but it does certainly make you more resilient, and it does make them, there's fewer inputs that are necessary in theory, with the healthier soil. Just like a healthier person, you'd expect to go to the doctor less than,
I think that's the most important takeaway of just kind of what the data was showing, was that the resiliency of the soil actually, kind of had a better productive system in troubling times like this year has been. So that's what I actually took out mostly from the presentation and the data points, but it'd be nice to kind of just dive in further and just see, just kind of really look at the data. But otherwise, the spring has been, as Lori said, a very wet one. We're planting trials as fast as we can. Corn and a bunch of our cucurbit trials went in this past week. We are actually doing a NOFA New York field day on the 10th of July. We're going to be doing and talking about soil health, our past management practices, what we're currently doing to actually help our soil health, and then our future management practices that we're basically going to be doing for the future, which will be more permanent beds, less till, alley cropping with cover crops in our walkways. We have a lot of different ideas going around right now with our new trials manager, who will be at the soil health field day talking about, what we did in the past, what we're going to do currently to help our soil health, and then our long-term goals and practices for going forward. And so we're doing that with NOFA New York. That's on the 10th of July. And then another program, which I'm actually going to be sort of creating some ideas with, is on the 19th of July, we're going down to Rodell Institute, who does a lot around soil health, and we're going to be talking with the soil scientists down there to see if they have their new vegetable systems trial, which is actually in its third year, in terms of it's another 30-year trial or study that they're doing around conventional variables versus organic variables, and what the long-term data will show in terms of what they kind of believe is that, having an organic practice in first 5-year data trial might not show the same output as a conventional trial, but what they want to show is that the 30 years, the long-term overview of how that actual soil health management, if it's done organically as opposed to, how some conventional is operated where you just go in till every year, you put down your amendments, your synthetic amendments, and then every year it's the same thing, whereas organic, it's more of a long-term approach. They're thinking that the long-term approach will have obviously more resilient soils to these different weather patterns that we're seeing that are becoming more extreme, and then seeing how much the productivity can overall be achieved in terms of that organic versus conventional. So we're going to be kind of talking with them about some different programs that we can help highlight that program more. But the big one I'm really excited about is the field day on the 10th of July.
Yeah, that's great. That's very interesting. If you would like, you could send that, if you had an announcement, send it to Joseph and I, and we can put it on our American Farmland Trust social media, and I'm sure Joseph could share it on theirs as well, from the lab, if you wanted us to.
Yeah, we're going to send out just a campaign, and that'll probably happen. I think it's happening on Monday is when it's scheduled to go out. Just to kind of point people to the NOFA website and the registration website. But then, I could just follow up with you about that campaign, and you guys can just share the link as well.
Sounds good. Thanks, Sam.
Yep, awesome. Thank you.
Sure. And then I think I saw that Matt was on. Let's see. Maybe some folks have. Let's see. Is Matt? Are you on there, Matt?
Yes, I am. Yes.
All right. How are you?
I'm good. I spend most of this time of the year in a sprayer, so that's been my primary role. But
yeah,
I guess being in the sprayer, one thing I've been doing is I wouldn't say reselling or reaffirming the reason why we do cover crops as guys plant into rye that's 3 feet tall, and they wonder why the heck they're doing it. So I do have to resell the cover crop program and explain the benefits of it. We've actually been pretty fortunate in my area. I mean, it's been wet, but I would say that 85 or 90% of the cropland has been planted.
Nice.
So
wow.
I don't know how that compares to the rest of the state, but it's things have gone in later than normal, but yeah, I mean, it's most of my dairy customers planted 95 or 100% of their land, and I would say grain is probably 80 or 90% has been planted. I was able to one of my crop growers. I'm interested to see how it goes. There was about 70 acres that he wasn't going to be able to plant, so I had talked him into. We did crimson clover on 70 acres of ground that it's been continuous corn for the last 15 years. So I'm looking forward to see how that helps. It would have been good to have had a soil health test off of it, just to see where the ground stood.
Yeah, that would have been a perfect time to get a baseline, but next time.
The problem, I guess it happens every spring, but especially this spring, everything happens at such a fast pace that a lot of stuff ends up being in hindsight.
Yeah, I hear you.
So,
Yep.
But yeah, other than that, I guess explaining the benefits of the cover crops, I've been doing that all spring, and it's kind of I don't know, it's become more of an all year discussion.
Yeah, that's great. Well, all right. Well, good luck out there. Might have to put floaties on the sprayer to. No, actually, you shouldn't be spraying when it's wet.
Right.
Anyway. All right. Well, good hearing from you, Matt. Was Corey out there? I don't think I see him, but some of these are just phone numbers. So I'll give him a second. Corey. Okay, and then what about Morgan? I also don't think I see Morgan on here. Okay, no Morgan, but I do see Tucker. How's it going, Tucker?
Hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. How are you doing?
All right. Yeah, so we're doing good. We're we're kind of in the middle of another round of Ag Non-Point grants. Every year it seems to push more and more into the spring, where we used to do a lot of our grant writing. In the midwinter, it seems to push into kind of a busier time of the year. So we're working on a couple of applications right now, mostly for nutrient management. We do have a couple active soil erosion control projects going on from past grants, and then so that kind of keeps us busy going on the field checkup on those. And what as far as kind of getting into the more specific soil health stuff, we have a couple of farms that we have in a grant for interseeding cover crops, and it's been a really wet year here in Ontario County as well. I'd say we're a lot of the farms have got a lot of ground planted in the brief periods that we did experience 3 or 4 good days in a row. But I just was talking with a couple of the farms yesterday just to make sure that they were still going to get a chance to interseed. It looks like we're definitely going to have a couple hundred acres interseeded in the corn this year and some in the vegetables. So we're just going to kind of, see how that goes. The guys kind of use different ways to interseed, from, we had, a couple of guys used the drill from Auburn Ag, a couple of guys broadcast into it, and a couple of guys just put it down right when they're cultivating. And we're, watching the different methods and see what works. Of course, the weather tends to be the biggest determining factor on interseeding, whether it's going to work or not. So
when are they going to go out to interseed, do you think?
So typically it'll be around the first, I'd say the second and third week in July is when we did most of it last year.
Okay.
What we're trying to do is coordinate that when, so we had the best success last year, I think, with the drill from Auburn Ag, with the exception of a couple fields that were cultivated. We had one farm that cultivated, a couple fields and just, put the cover crop seeded at the same time, using kind of a homemade setup. And he had a fantastic stand, but he got a nice rain right after that. We had another farm do the same thing a week later after the rain, and then we didn't get rain for 2 weeks and had almost zero success on that one. But we did have, the drill, come in and do a couple hundred acres from Auburn Ag. And then we didn't get rain after that, and we still got a stand off of that. I wouldn't call it great, but considering it had the weather, a couple weeks without rain, I thought it did pretty good. So, but our goal this year is to try to coordinate. So when we have that unit in, getting a couple farms to kind of get the bounce from farm to farm to maybe get even some more acres cover cropped with it. So, but it's just one of those things where we're trying to, all these farms are kind of in the same area of the county, to try to get kind of a group of farms working together on that, because it's definitely, it's you get such a short window to interseed that when you have a unit in that can do, hundreds of acres in a hurry, it's nice to have a couple farms lined up in a row. So we're going to shoot for that this year, and see how that goes. Where, it's something where we also have the availability to do interseeding in the Genesee River watershed. In our county, the portion that's in Genesee River watershed is more It's a lot of like hay and grazing. Just that just happens to be one of those little sections of the county is pretty rough ground, so we don't have a ton of the crop guys there. So I don't know if we'll end up using that unit. That's the I'd call it, I guess, the Penn State interseed unit. But if a farm over there was interested, we would try to use that with them. But so far, like, we haven't had a whole ton of interest in that portion of the county. So
you guys take it, you guys drive it around?
So it can be hauled. Yeah, any of the counties in the river watershed should have access to it. Would be up to the district to get it over to the farm, which has of course been a that has hindered getting the unit around. I'd like to see it used more, even in the counties more where it's located. We haven't had a ton of use on it. Yeah, I think Allegheny County's got a couple farms that are going to use it this year. There's 2 units in there, and I mean, if any of the other people on listening now, or if they work with farms that are interested in trying it, they can contact their district if they are in the Genesee River watershed and see about getting that. It is available. It's not easy to haul around. I know some of the other units out there now, you can kind of turn sideways and stuff, and I think they're a lot more transportable than the other unit there, and it takes a heck of a truck to move anything bigger than the 4-row. So but it's there. We'd like to see more use of it, and I think that if you're a farm nearby a district, so it's housed kind of centrally in the watershed, which I think the closest one to us is in Genesee County, so it would it'd be a long drive just to get it. But if farms are located up in that area and it's close by, it would be pretty easy to get it out on their operation. So it's one of them things where if there is interest from a farm of trying it out, even just on one field, that unit is available. And unless things change this year, I'd say it's been underutilized. So hopefully we can get some more farms to use it. What we found is it's easier for us to have to do have a custom operator come in, bring their unit, and just do it. It's actually, just a lot less hassle.
And pay them.
Yeah, and pay them. And when we do our program, for that, we actually do we do a partial cost share by acre, and it just works a lot better. It's a lot more efficient to put that in the hands of a custom operator. So
that makes sense.
We would rather actually do that than try to get the unit, and being that the unit closest to us is small, I mean, you just really can't take on hundreds of acres of it, in a couple of days with it like we can by having it custom done. So that's the direction we're going in Ontario County with it. So the goal, which I don't know, is one of the farms that interseeded about 400 acres last year. He had his best success in late season cabbage with it. He's thinking about buying a unit himself, and he's centrally located right in the middle of all of our, a lot of our, I call it like a breadbasket areas, but like some of the best agricultural land in the county. And if he does that, I foresee like them doing custom work with their neighboring farms as well, which is kind of the goal that we've set out to do, is to get farms having enough success with this to invest in it themselves, because the programs, they come and go. So, I don't want cover cropping, soil health, all the stuff to be based just on programs. We want to help get it started through programs, let the farms carry it on themselves, but we'll absorb some of the risk in the beginning by cost sharing it by acre.
Yeah, that would be ideal. Well, thanks, Tucker. We're running out of time, so I think we just have a couple folks left. So I think that Brian Lord is on. Are you there, Brian? Are you unmuted?
Yeah, he looks unmuted, but he doesn't have any icon next to his name, so I don't know what that means. Any phone or?
Oh, okay. All right. And then the last person that I think is on here was Jody.
Morning.
So, hey, good morning, Jody. How are you?
Good. How are you guys?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for the presentation and update on the research. It's really interesting. I'd be interested in seeing if we could incorporate some of those specific measurements into our cover crop trial we have going on at Macaulay's this year. So just an update on my end. As everybody else has mentioned, it's been a wet spring. Despite that, I was able to get all of my research plots in to date right now. So the only thing I have left to really work on at this point getting implemented is the cover crop trial at John Macaulay's, so that we can have a good field day here in August.
Awesome.
So other than that, first cutting, we still have some stands up out there in the field with this wet weather. A lot of the stands that have gone ahead, they're falling down. We've got some insect issues out in our area that people are spraying for when they can, and people are still trying to do field work. My Ag Focus article for this coming month is talking about why you want to plant a cover crop and not leave your field open, since we did have a lot of people take some preventative plant. So just wrote an article up about why you don't leave your field open and the benefits of cover cropping. That's it.
All right, well, it sounds busy. So just, Jody, tomorrow I am calling John. I'll send you an email, but around 10, maybe you could jump in on that. But anyway, I'll send you an email about that later. But thanks, everyone. I think that's it. Was there anybody else out there that I missed? So, all right. Well, again, thank you. Thanks to Joseph for putting together the presentation and sharing the data. And we'll be sending out some emails regarding the workshop that's coming up in August. And we look forward to seeing everyone then. So thank you.